Welcome to BeFM Drama, where we turn great works of English literature into gripping radio. I'm your host, Joshua Cornwell, and on today's edition of the program, we're bringing you the first of 5 parts in our adaptation of In the Abyss, a classic 1898 work of early science fiction by the English master H.G. Wells. In the Abyss concerns the exploits of the scientist Elstead, who has embarked on a daring expedition. Using a spherical steel submersible of his own design, a kind of bathysphere, Elstead intends to drop himself down 8 kilometers from the ocean's surface to its deepest depths, to a landscape that no human eye has ever gazed upon before. As our story begins, Elstead's scientific companions and the crew of the Royal Navy cruiser they're sailing on contemplate the chances for a successful expedition. The lieutenant stood in front of the steel sphere and puffed thoughtfully at his pipe.
What do you think of it, Stevens?
Stevens replied in the tone of a man who does his best to keep an open mind.
Well, Lieutenant Weybridge, it's certainly an idea.
I believe it will smash. Flat.
Stevens maintained his impartial tone.
He seems to have calculated out all pretty well.
But think of the pressure. At the surface of the water, it's 14 pounds to the inch. 30 feet down, it's double that. 60 treble, 94 times, 940 times, 5,300. That's a mile. It's 240 times 14 pounds. That's, let's see, 3,000 weight. 1.5 tons, Stevens. 1.5 tons to the square inch. And at the ocean where he's going, it's 5 miles deep. That's 7.5.
It certainly does sound like a lot, but you must admit it's jolly thick steel.
The lieutenant made no answer, but resumed his pipe. The object of their conversation was a huge globe of steel, having an exterior diameter of perhaps 8 feet. It looked like the shot for some titanic piece of artillery. It was elaborately nested in a monstrous scaffolding built into the framework of the vessel, and the gigantic spars that were presently to sling it overboard gave the stern of the ship an appearance that had raised the curiosity of every decent sailor who had sighted it, from the Pool of London to the Tropic of Capricorn. In 2 places, one above the other, the steel gave place to a couple of circular windows of enormously thick glass, and one of these, set in a steel frame of great solidity, was now partially unscrewed. Both the men had seen the interior of this globe for the first time that morning. It was elaborately padded with air cushions, with little studs sunk between bulging pillows to work the simple mechanism of the affair. Everything was elaborately padded. Even the Myers apparatus, which was to absorb carbonic acid and replace the oxygen breathed by its passenger when he had crept in by the glass manhole and had been screwed inside. It was so elaborately padded that a man might have been fired from a gun in it in perfect safety. And it had need to be, for presently a man was to crawl in through that glass manhole, to be screwed up tightly and to be flung overboard, to sink down, 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 for 5 miles, even as the lieutenant said. It had taken the strongest hold of his imagination. It made him a bore at mess, and he found Stevens, the new arrival aboard, a godsend to talk about it, over and over again.
It's my opinion that the glass will simply bend in and bulge and smash under a pressure of that sort. Dobry has made rocks run like water under high enough pressures, and you mark my words.
If the glass did break in, what then?
The water would shoot in like a jet of iron. Have you ever felt a straight jet of high-pressure water? It would hit as hard as a bullet. It would simply smash him and flatten him. It would tear down his throat and into his lungs. It would blow in his ears.
Stevens frowned as he vividly pictured the scene the lieutenant was describing.
What a detailed imagination you have.
Lieutenant Weybridge drew his lips into a humorless smile and sighed.
It's a simple statement of the inevitable.
And the globe?
Would just give out a few little bubbles, and it would settle down comfortably against the day of judgment among the oozes and the bottom clay, with poor Elstead spread over his own smashed cushions like butter over bread.
The lieutenant paused and then repeated the sentence as though he liked it very much.
Like butter? overbread.
Suddenly a voice spoke from behind them. Having a look at the sphere? Elstead stood behind them, standing spick and span in white, with a cigarette between his teeth and his eyes smiling out of the shadow of his ample hat brim. What's that about bread and butter, Weybridge? Grumbling as usual about the insufficient pay of naval officers? It won't be more than a day now before I start. We are to get the slings ready today. This clean sky and gentle swell is just the kind of thing for swinging off 20 tons of lead and iron, isn't it?
Well, it certainly won't affect you much once you're down below the waves.
No. 70 or 80 feet down, and I shall be there in a dozen seconds. There's not a particle moving, though the wind shrieks itself hoarse up above and the water lifts halfway to the clouds. No, down there... He moved to the side of the ship, and the other two followed him. All three leant forward on their elbows and stared into the yellow-green water. Elstead finished his thought aloud. Peace. The three men stood in silence for a moment before the lieutenant finally spoke.
Are you dead certain that clockwork will act?
It has worked 35 times before. It's bound to work.
But if it doesn't?
Why shouldn't it?
Well, I can say for certain that I wouldn't ever go down in that confounded thing, not for £20,000.
Elstead spat sociably at the steel bubble hanging above them in the darkness. Cheerful chap you are, Lieutenant.
I don't understand yet how you mean to work the thing.
In the first place, I'm screwed into the sphere, and when I've turned the electric light off and on 3 times to show I'm cheerful, I'm swung over the stern by that crane, with all these big lead sinkers slung below me. The top lead weight has a roller carrying 100 fathoms of strong cord rolled up, and that's all that joins the sinkers to the sphere, except the slings that will be cut when the affair is dropped. We use cord rather than wire rope because it's easier to cut and more buoyant. Necessary points, as you will see. Through each of these lead weights, you notice there is a hole, and an iron rod will be run through that and will project 6 feet on the lower side. If that rod is rammed up from below, it knocks up a lever that sets the clockwork in motion at the side of the cylinder on which the cord winds. Very well. The whole affair is lowered gently into the water, and the slings are cut. The sphere floats. With the air in it, it's lighter than water, but the lead weights go straight down, and the cord runs out. When the cord is all paid out, the sphere will go down too, pulled down by the cord. Again, they stood together in silence for a moment, contemplating the strange steel submersible hanging above them. This time it was Stevens who broke the silence.
But why the cord? Why not fasten the weights directly to the sphere?
Because of the crash down below. The whole affair will go rushing down, mile after mile, at a headlong pace. It would be knocked to pieces on the bottom if it wasn't for that cord. But the weights will hit the bottom first, and directly they do, the buoyancy of the sphere will come into play. It will go on sinking slower and slower, come to a stop at last, and then begin to float upward again. That's where the clockwork comes in. Directly the weights smash against the sea bottom, the rod will be knocked through and will kick up the clockwork, and the cord will be rewound on the wheel. I shall be lugged down to the sea bottom. There I shall stay for half an hour, with the electric light on, looking about me. Then the clockwork will release a spring knife, the cord will be cut, and up I shall rush again, like a soda water bubble. The cord itself will help with the flotation.
And if you should chance to hit a ship?
I should come up at such a pace I should go clean through it, like a cannonball. But you needn't worry about that.
And suppose some nimble crustacean should wriggle into your clockwork?
Well, it would certainly be a pressing invitation for me to stop. With that, Elstead fell silent once more, turning his back on the water and staring up at the sphere. Time is running out. Very soon now, Elstead will be screwed into his padded steel ball and dropped like a stone into the miles-deep water of the uncharted oceanic abyss. Will his contraption hold together, or will the morbid Lieutenant Weybridge's worst fears be realized? Join us again tomorrow evening to find out here on BeFM Drama as Elstead embarks on his daring expedition.